So, okay. Okay, so in the last class, okay, I said you about working with so functions, and here we have seen local variables and global variables. So when you're talking about global variables, so the variables what you declare outside the function are called as global variables. And these variables can be used anywhere within the function. When I said to access this, you can access the global variables directly. You can access the global variables directly, but you cannot modify it. If you want to modify the global variables within the function, you have to use which keyword? Global keyword. So without using global keyword, you cannot. Without using global keyword, you cannot modify global variables within the function. Okay, for example, suppose assume that, so I declare some two global variables, n1 equal to 100 or n1 equal to some 10 and n2 equal to some 5. So there is a function called add. So where I'm trying to add these two numbers. Okay, sum is, I'm just writing n1 plus n2. So there is a function called sub and print. I'm just writing here difference is n1 minus n2. So there is a function called multiply. Okay, print format. Product is, okay, product is n1 into n2. See here, same variables I'm using in how many functions? 4 functions. So I try to access n1 inside add function. These two variables are accessible in add function. These two variables accessible in sub function. These two variables accessible in multiply function. These two variables accessible in what? Division function. So print format. Some result is n1 divided by n2. Okay, so then I call the functions like add function, sub function, multiply function, and one more is what? Division. So how many executable statements are there in this? Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So how many executable statements are there? 6 executable statements are there. How many executable statements here? Six executable statements. So 1, 2, and this is a 3, and 4, 5, and one more is what? 6. So what will happen first? It allocates memory for what will happen first? It allocates memory for which variables? Global variables. So it allocates memory for n1 and it allocates memory for what? n2. These are two variables. The value of n1 is 10. The value of n2 is a 5. So this is 10. The value of n1 is 10. The value of n2 is what here? 5. Okay, so these are global variables. So after that, it will call the function add. So the add function, what it will do, it will add these two numbers. So that is nothing but n1 is 10 and n2 is a 5. So 10 plus 5 is what here? 15. Then it will call the function called sub. Okay, so difference is n1 minus n2. So that is 10 minus 5. The value is what here? 5. But always the first priority is given to local. So when you call multiply, it look for n1, n2 variables within multiply function. Is it n1, n2 variables are there in multiply function? No. The next priority is given to global. So n1 is 10 and n2 is what here? 5. So 10 into 5 is what? 50. Okay, then called division function. So result is n1 divided by n2. So it look for the variables n1, n2 inside which function? Division function. Is it n1, n2 is there in division function? No. Then it look for this n1, n2 in which section? Global. Is it n1, n2 is there in the global? Yes. So that is 10 divided by 5, which is 2.0. So it means the same data is shared by how many functions? 4 functions. So if you want to share the data between number of functions, then declare the data as a global. If you want to share the data between number of functions, then declare the data as what here? Global. Now once you run this, you can see sum is 15, difference is 5, sum is 15, difference is 5, product is 50, and result is 2.0. Okay. So global variables, Okay, global variables can be accessible. Okay, global variables are accessible anywhere, right? But cannot be modified. If you want to modify it, you have to use a keyword called global. If you want to modify it, for example, I declare two variables. Suppose I want to find area of triangle. See, I want to find area of triangle. So I declare global variables like base equal to 0.0 and height equal to 0.0. I have two variables. One is the base and one more is a height. I have two variables. One is a base and one more is a height. See, I declare this as a global. So why I declare this as a global? Because I declare this variables as a global because I want to use this in one function called read. I have two functions here. One is reading and one more is what? Finding area. Okay. So I try to divide my logic into how many functions here? Two functions. One is a read function and one more is what? Find area function. So your read function should read the base and height of the triangle, and find area function, it should find the area using this base and height. So read function should read the base and height of the triangle, and find area function should find the area using the base and what is that? Height. So first one is read function. It should read the base and height. Means I should assign values. I should assign value to the base. But can I assign the value to the base global variable directly? No. If I'm writing here base equal to 1.5, what will happen? It will look for the variable base inside the read function. Is it any variable base inside the read function? No. It will create it. It will create in which section? Local. But my requirement is I want to assign this 1.5 to which variable? Global variable. Then it is not possible to assign it without global. You have to say global base comma height. This indicates that you are trying to use which variables here? Global variables. You are trying to use which variables? Global variables. So here I'll try to read from keyboard. So input base of the triangle. Then I'm trying to say height, float of input. So you have to input height of the triangle. You have to input the base of the triangle and you have to input what? Height of the triangle. So there is a function called find area. So that will find the area of the triangle. So where I'm saying area, okay, area equal to base into height 0.5 into base into what is that? Height. Then after that I'm printing, okay, area of triangle is, I'm trying to print what here? Area. If you want only two decimal parts, you can use dot 2f. So read function reads the base and height of the triangle. Read function, read the base and height of the triangle. So you are reading which variables values, global variables values. But you are accessing this global variables and assigning it by using the keyword called global. Okay, then I call the function read and then call the function what here? Find area. Call the function read and find area. So here is asking input base and input what here? Height. Now you can see area of triangle is 0.90. Area of triangle is 0.90. So this is global variables. This is global variables. Yeah, we'll see that. We'll see. We'll see that also. With another concept, I'll explain that. Okay, based on the choice, right? Okay. Then we will see function with what is that? Arguments. Function with the arguments. So here we write, till now we write the functions without arguments. Till now we write the functions without arguments. For example, you are writing a function 1. So function 1 doesn't receive any values. Function 1 doesn't receive any values because this function 1 is not with arguments. This function 1 is this function 1 is not with arguments. This function 1 is without arguments. Function 1 is not with arguments. Function 1 is without arguments. Okay, so I'm just writing a message called which one? Hello. So I write the function 1. I can call the function 1 without sending values. I cannot say function 1. I cannot input values. So here you are calling the function 1 by sending values. But is it function 1 receive values? No. You are sending values to the function 1. Okay. You are sending values to the function 1. But function 1, is it able to receive values? No. Because this function is not with arguments. This function is without arguments. If you run this, it is given type error. Function 1 takes how many arguments? 0 arguments. But you are given how many? 2. So if you want to give values to the function, you have to write function with what? Arguments. Function with arguments. Arguments. So what is arguments here is, arguments are local variables, okay, which receive values from, arguments are local variables which receive values from calling function or calling place. Calling function or calling place. Or you can say function with arguments receive values. Function with arguments receive values. If function required input, a function required input to perform certain operations, We define that function. We define that function with arguments. Python allows to write a function with 4 types of arguments. Function Python allows to write function with 4 types of arguments. First one is required positional arguments, or same thing called required arguments. Second one is a default arguments or optional arguments. And third one is variable length arguments, And fourth one is keyword arguments. You can write a function with how many types of arguments? 4 types. Required positional arguments are required arguments. Second one is default arguments are optional arguments. And third one is variable length arguments. And fourth one is what? Keyword arguments. So you can write a function with how many types of arguments? 4 types of arguments. You can write a function with how many types of arguments? 4 types of arguments. Required positional arguments are required arguments. Required positional arguments are required arguments. Default arguments are optional arguments. Variable length arguments and keyword arguments. But here, first one is required positional arguments, or same thing is called as required arguments. So these arguments required values. These arguments required values at the time of calling the function. At the time of calling the function. Required arguments required values at the time of calling the function. If the values are not given to these arguments, if the values are not given to these arguments, if the values are not given to these arguments, so compiler generate error. If the values are not given to these arguments, compiler gives a error. Syntax. If you see the syntax here, definition, function name, which function you want to write, arguments 1, 2, 3, like this. So there is a statement 1 and there is a statement 2. So how many statements are included in the function? 2 statements. That is statement 1, and one more is what? Statement 2. 2 statements are included, statement 1 and statement 2. So these are the arguments. Okay. For example, so a function required input. Okay. Okay, there is a function called power. This function required some input, like how many inputs it required? Number. And it also required which one? Power. Now this is a function with how many arguments? 2 arguments. Arguments are nothing but local variables. Arguments are nothing but what? Local variables. It is having how many arguments here? 2 arguments. The first one is a number and second one is what? P. So it will receive it, and after receiving, I'm printing format power of, or num to the power of p is num power of p is, okay, is num to the power of p. So this is formatting, right? Okay. Now, whenever I call the function, I call the function by sending values. So it is required. You are calling which function? Power function. You are calling which function? Power function by sending two values. So this 5 is a value of number and 2 is a value of which one? P. So there is a memory allocated for which function? Power function. There is a memory allocated for which function? Power function. Within that function, it allocates memory for number as well as P. So what is the value of number? 5. What is the value of P? 2. So there is a number and there is a P. The value of number is 5. The value of P is what here? 2. So that is nothing but num to the power of P. So what is the value of number? 5. What is the value of P here? 2. And what is the num to the power of P? 25. So once the function execution is over, it will come to the calling place. Once it is come to the calling place, this memory is what? Deallocate. So arguments are local variables for which memory is allocated when function is called. Arguments are local variables for which memory is allocated when the function is called and deallocated once the execution of function is completed. When memory is allocated when the function is called and deallocated once the execution of function is completed. Execution of function is completed, right? Now I call the function power by sending 8. 8 is a number and 3 is what? Value. So I'm sending values. I can send the values to it, right? So once I run this, I can see 5 to the power of 2 is 25, 8 to the power of 3 is 512. But can I call the function power without sending any values? Can I call this function power without sending any values? No. I cannot call the function power without sending any values because this function is with arguments or without with arguments. Means it required how many inputs? Two inputs, that is number, and one more is a P. But what will happen if I run this? It is given error. What is error here? Type error. Power function missing two required positional arguments. Power function missing two required positional arguments. First one is a number and second one is what? P. So you must give values. You must give the values when you call the function. If you are calling the function without giving values, then it generates what? Error. That is what required. Required arguments, required values, required values at the time of calling the function. Required arguments, required values at the time of calling the function. Suppose if you don't give the values, then it gives what? Error. But these values can be given in any order. For example, I write a function 1 with a, b, c. Function 1 is having how many arguments? 3 arguments. A, b, and one more is what here? C. Okay, this function one is having, okay, so this function receive three values. So that is A, B, and one more value is what? C. So I try to print A value, B value, and C value. So you can invoke this function one by sending 100, 200, and 300. So the order of sending is first, which value is sent here? 100 is a A value, and 200 is a B value, and 300 is a C value. But I want to change the order. First, I want to give C value. You can give with argument name. You can give with the argument name. Now C value is 900, A value is 400, so B value is some 600. So what will happen in this case? First, you are giving the value of C, then you are giving the value of A, then you are giving value of what? B. So you want to give the value to whichever argument, we can give it by using what name? Argument name. You can give it with argument name. Now you can see 100, 200, and 300. A value is 400, and B value is 600, and C value is what? 900. So if you want to change the order of input the values, you can change it by sending with the help of argument names. By sending with the help of what? Argument names. Argument names. Okay, you can send it with the argument names. A function not only receive values, a function not only receive values. Here, the function is receiving values. A function is receiving values, but a function not only receive values, it is also return value. So in order to return value to the calling place, it is using which keyword? Return keyword. A function return, a function return value or result to the calling function, to the calling function or calling place. Calling function or calling place. A function return value or result to calling function or calling place using return keyword. So return keyword after returning value, it terminates execution of what? Function. Return keyword after returning value, it terminates execution of what? Function. So return, it followed by value or it followed by expression. Return, it followed by value or expression. Return, it followed by value or what? Expression. Return followed by value or expression. Okay, written followed by value, or what is that? Expression. Written followed by value, or it followed by what here? Expression, right? So a function return the value. Suppose if I'm saying function 1, I said return 10. Function 1 is returning one value. Suppose I write another function, function 2, return 10 plus 20. For example, I call the function 1. When I call the function 1, what will happen? Function 1 is called, and function 1 is returning one value, not printing. It is returning one value. It is returning one value. Whenever function return the value, that function is assigned to one variable. Whenever function return the value, that function is assigned to one variable. So function 1 is called, but function 1 is returning one value. So where I should store that value into one variable? Suppose I'll say a equal to function 1. So when you can assign the function to the variable, if the function is returning value. When you can assign the function to a variable, when function is returning value. When it is written, it should catch. When it is returning, it should catch it, right? So when a function is returning value, you should assign it to one variable. If function is not returning value, you don't require to assign it to what? Variable. I'm trying to say b equal to what here? Function 2. B equal to function 2. Now, which function is called function 2? Function 2 is returning value 10 plus 20, and this 10 plus 20 is assigned to which variable? B. So when function is returning value, it is assigned to what? Variable. When it is returning a result. Suppose I write another function called function 3. So function 3 is not returning any value. I just write here a equal to 10. I just write. Now I'll say function 3. I just call the function 3. But is it function 3 is returning any value? No. Then I don't require to assign it to any variable. When you assign the function to a variable, if the function is returning value. If the function is not returning value, you don't assign it to any variable. You don't assign it to any variable, right? So I call the function 1, and the function 1 value is assigned to A, and function 2 result is assigned to what here? B. Where I'll say print A comma B. Print A comma B, the value of A is 10, the value of B is 30. The value of A is 10 and the value of B is 30 here, right? So function is not only receive values, it is also return the values. For example, there is a number of functions. There is a function called area of circle. What this function receive the input as? Radius. What is the input for area of circle? Radius. Okay. And here I find the area 3 pi r square, 3.147 into r into r. Then return area. Then next one is area of which one? Triangle. What is the inputs? Base and height. So area equal to 0.5 into base into height. Then return what? area. Then what is the next function? Area of rectangle. Radius of rectangle. So what is the inputs here? Length and breadth. So L into B, and written what is that? Area. So it means these functions receive the radius and calculate the radius and return it. This function receive the inputs like base and height and calculate the area and return it. This function receive the values of rectangle and calculate area and return it. So where I try to display now, while true, I display the menu. Okay, area of circle. Okay, there is a second option. Area of which one? Triangle. So there is a third option. Area of rectangle. Okay, now there is a fourth option. Fourth option is what? Exact. If option is, you have to input the option. Integer of input, enter your option. So if option is 1, you have to call the function. Which function you have to call? Result equal to, you have to call. If the option is 1, you have to read the radius. Input, float of input, uh, enter radius of circle. Then result equal to, or area equal to area of, which function are you calling? Circle by sending radius. Then you are printing it. Area of circle is, you're just printing area with 2 decimal places. Else if this is option is 1, else if option is 2, you have to enter base and height. So input, enter base of the triangle, height equal to float of input, enter height of the triangle. So base of the triangle, height of the triangle, and area equal to area of triangle is. So I call which function? Area of triangle by sending the base and what is that? Height. So this is area of triangle is. I just print which one? Area with dot 2f. So else if option is 3, you have to input L value. So enter L. So float of, enter B. Then you have to call the function area of, which function I should call? Rectangle. By sending L value and what? B value, print format area of rectangle, just print area dot 2f. Else if option is 4, you have to say what here? Break. So that is for terminating the loop. You're terminating the loop by including which statement here? Break statement. So I write how many functions here? 3 functions. One is a function which finds an area of circle. One is a function which finds an area of triangle. One is a function which finds an area of what? Rectangle. So based on the input, while true I said, while true means this is infinite loop. But when this loop is terminated, if the option is what? 4. If the option is 4, you are saying what? Break. If the option is 1, you are reading the radius and calling which function? Area of circle function. If the option is 2, you are reading the base and height and you are calling which function? Area of triangle function. If the option is 3, you are reading the length and breadth and you are calling area of rectangle by sending L and B values. Now once you run this, so the option is 1, enter radius. So 1.5, and you can see area of circle is 7.08. Option 2, triangle 1.2, 1.3. Now area of triangle is 0.78. So where I input some 1.0 and 1.2, I can see area of rectangle is 1.20 and 4 is for exit. But here we write different functions for finding what? Area. We write different functions for finding the area. So that is area of circle, area of triangle, and one more is area of rectangle. Okay, so function receive the value. Function receive the value. So functions receive the values. Function receive the values, and it is not only receive the values, it is also written what here? Values. It is not only receive the values, these are also written what here? Values, right? So now function is having, I said no, there are different types of arguments. Okay, required positional arguments, which are called as required arguments. It means required arguments required values. Required arguments required what? Values. For example, I'm writing a function called string upper. Is a function which receive what? String. String upper is a function which receive the string. What is the job of string upper? Converting string into which case? Uppercase. This function receive the string and then convert. Okay, string upper. Now I create one more string which is empty. The string is which string here? Empty. And what you're doing is every time you are reading one character from the string and you are checking, is it that character is greater than or equal to A? Is it character is less than or equal to what? Z. Character is greater than or equal to A and character is less than or equal to Z. What you have to do? You have to convert this into which case? Uppercase. You have to convert into which case here? Uppercase. How you are converting it? You are trying to say ORD of CH minus 32, and you convert this into which one? Character. And then you are concatenating by saying S equal to S plus. Otherwise, you are concatenating as it is. Otherwise, you are concatenating as it is. Otherwise, you are concatenating as it is. Then return. After doing it, you are returning uppercase string. Okay, now string 1 equal to string upper. I call the function string upper by sending some Java. str2 equal to string upper. Okay, I'll be sending, what is that here? Python. Then I print string 1. Then I print string 2. I try to print string 1. I try to print string 2. I print string 1 as well as what? String 2. I try to print string 1 and string 2. String 1, Java in uppercase, and Python is also in which case? Uppercase. But this is my own function. String upper is my own function where I include the logic of converting string into which case? Uppercase. I include the logic of converting string into which case? Uppercase. So function is not only having required arguments. Function is not only having required arguments. Function is not only having required arguments. Function is also having default arguments or optional arguments. So default arguments are optional arguments. So these arguments are given. These arguments are given values at the time of writing function. These arguments are given values. These arguments are given values at the time of writing the function. These arguments are given values at the time of writing function, at the time of writing the function or defining the function. These arguments are given values at the time of writing function. So when function is invoked or when function is called or invoked, if the values for these arguments are not given, if the values of these arguments are not given, it takes which values? Default values. It takes which values? Default values. For example, syntax is, you are writing like this. For example, best example is, you have one predefined function called print. Print is there. Print is having separator. What is the default separator? Space. What is the default end? \n. Print is having number of arguments. But are you giving value of separator? No. If you don't give the value of separator, then what is the default separator it takes? Space. If you don't give the value, it takes the default value. If you don't give the value, it takes what here? Default value. If you don't give the value, it takes what? Default value. What is a default separator? Space. What is a default END? Backslash EN. Like that. So what is the syntax? The syntax is definition, function name. And you're trying to give the arguments. Now these are required arguments, but default arguments are given values. Argument 3, argument 4 equal to what is that? Values. So you are giving values. Statement 1 and statement what here? 2. So how you are writing it? You are writing like this: definition, function name, and you are giving what here? Arguments. Argument 1, argument 2, but argument 3 is given value. Argument 4 also given value, but argument 1, argument 2 are required arguments. In this syntax, above syntax, argument 1, argument 2 are required arguments. Argument 1, comma, argument 2 are required arguments. Argument 3, comma, argument 4, argument 3, comma, argument 4 are which arguments? Default arguments. Default arguments are, or it is called which one? Optional arguments. Argument 3, argument 4 are default arguments or optional arguments. So what is the meaning of this is, for example, if you're writing a function, suppose function 1 is there. Okay, so there is a function 1. I'm writing a function 1 with required arguments. So A, B values are required. A, B values are what here? Required. I write another function 2 where I given x value is 10 and y value is what here? 20. This function is default arguments. So when I'm calling the function 1, I must give the value for A and B. When I'm calling the function 1, I must give value for A and B, because here this function is with the required arguments. But when I'm calling this function, I don't require to give the values for x and y, because x and y are which arguments? Default arguments. I call the function 1 with 100 and 200. So 100 is a value of which one? A, and 200 is a value of B. So it will print this is 100 and this is what here? 200. But when I call the function 2, I don't give any values. I just call the function 2, but is having 2 arguments. But are you given values to these arguments? No. If you don't give it, then what is the x value? 10. What is the y value? 20. If you don't give the values, then it takes the default values. If you don't give the values, then it takes the default values. Now, if you run this is 100 and 200, and this is 10, and what is that? 20. If you don't give the values, okay, it takes the default values. But if you give the values, for example, I give some 900 and 800. So what will be the X value? 900. What is the Y value? 800. So if you run this, X value is 900, Y value is 800. I can call this function to, I can call the function to by sending, for example, 400. What is 400? X value. I've given X value, but not given which value? Y value. I've given X value. What is X value? 400. Y value is 20. I can call the function to by giving Y value. So Y value is given some 600. Y value is given 600. Then what is X value? 10. X value is 10 and Y value is what? 600. X value is 10. Now I call 900 and 800. 400 is X value. Why is a because these are default. These are what here? Default. If you don't give the values, then it takes what? Default values. If you don't give the values, then it takes the default values. If you don't give the values, then it takes which values? Default values. If you don't give the values, then it takes a default value. For example, there is a function called assume that draw line is there. So draw line required a character, but if you don't give the character, it takes the default character as a star, and there is a length, and the default length is 20. So draw line is a function, it will draw the line. Draw line is a function, it will draw the line by receiving how many inputs? 2 inputs. One is a character and one more is a length. It received 2 inputs. One is a character and one more is a length. Range of L. And print character. Yes, this is a line. So I call the function draw line, but without giving any inputs. Okay, I call the function draw line, but without giving any inputs. Means I have not given value to the character. I have not given value to what? Length. Length value is not given and character value also not given. Length value is not given and character value also not given. Okay, length value is not given and even character value also not given. So what will happen? It calls a function draw line. Then what is the character it takes? Star. And what is the length it takes? 30. Means it will repeat how many stars here? 30 stars. It will repeat how many stars here? 30 stars. If you run this, you can see draw the line by repeating how many stars here? 30. Suppose I want to draw the line. I call the function draw line. I just give the length. Length equal to 60. Which value is given here? Length. But will it take length is a 30 or length is a 60? 60. Whatever value you give, it takes that value. If you don't give it, then it takes which value? Default value. So are you given length or not? Yes. So it will take the length as what now? 60. So what will happen if you run this? It draw with how many stars? 60 stars. It draw with how many stars here? 50 stars. Now I want to draw the line. I want to draw the line, but this time I want to give the character. So what is the value of character is given? Dollar. But length will be the same or not? Yes. So we draw the line with the dollar with the same length. So I want to call the function draw line where I want to define character as well as length. Character as well as what? Length. So draw with cap symbols. Okay. So you can call the function in different ways because these arguments are what here? Default. If you don't give the input, it takes the default input. If you don't give the input, then it takes the default input. Default input. If you don't give the input, then it takes the default input. Default input it takes. So what function can have required arguments. For example, simple interest is there. So simple interest. Okay, simple interest is a function. Okay, simple interest is a function that will calculate interest by receiving amount of time, rate of interest. But which one is optional here? Rate of interest is optional. Which one is required here? Amount is required. Which one is required arguments? Amount is required argument and time is also required argument, but rate of interest is what? Default. Yes. So I calculate simple interest equal to amount into time into rate divided by 100. Then return simple interest. Now I call the function simple interest because it is returning value by sending the amount and time. By sending the amount and time. Which function is called now? Simple interest. by sending the amount, and by sending the amount and by sending the time. But is it rate is given or not given? No. If it is not given, then it takes the default rate. What is the default rate here? 1.5. Simple interest 2 equal to simple interest. So I try to give the amount. I try to give the amount and time as well as rate of interest. Now in this case, 3 values are given, but these are required. Amount is required and time is also required. But rate is not required, but even I've given, then will it take the default rate or 1.7? 1.7. If you give the value, it takes that value. If you don't give the value, then it takes a default value. If you give the value, it takes that value. If you don't give the value, then it takes a default value. So there is a 9,000 and 16,320, right? Now that is a default. So if you want to make certain values as default or optional, then you are using default arguments or optional arguments, right? So there is another type of arguments also you can write. There's one more type of arguments you can also write, and that is variable length arguments. There is one more type of arguments also you can write, and that you can call it as variable length arguments. Function with variable length arguments. So an argument which receive 0 or more values. One argument receive 0 or more values is called variable length argument, which receives 0 or more values. This argument is prefixed with what? Star. This argument is prefixed with star, and this argument is of type which one? Tuple. This argument is which type here? Tuple type. This argument is of type tuple, and it is prefixed with star. Okay, right? So we'll see this. Otherwise, like how to work with this variable length arguments. Tomorrow we'll see it, right? So today we'll stop it here, and tomorrow we'll continue this. Okay, right?
Uh,